Drowning in crushing debt, an artist faced public humiliation as a ruthless loan shark declared her his at a secret auction. She thought the mysterious billionaire who outbid everyone was her savior. But that man, Damien Volkov, the city's infamous mafia boss, didn't just buy her art. He violently claimed her. Now trapped in his golden cage, will his dark obsession be her sanctuary or her ultimate demise? The biting chill of the November air clawed through the cracked window pane of Alara Vance's studio apartment, a constant, unwelcome companion. It seeped into her bones, making her fingers ache as she meticulously mixed shades of midnight blue and bruised violet on her worn palette. The scent of turpentine and old coffee was a familiar comfort in the tiny space, a world away from the glamorous, perfumed existence she sometimes glimpsed through flickering news reports. Her studio, if one could call it that, was a single room above a perpetually bustling bakery in the city's less-than-picturesque industrial district. The faint, sweet smell of yeast and sugar often mingled with the sharp tang of her paints, a strange juxtaposition of life and art. Alara shivered, pulling the threadbare woolen shawl tighter around her shoulders. Her breath plumed in the frigid air, a stark visual of the cold that permeated every aspect of her existence. She hadn't eaten a proper meal in days, the gnawing emptiness in her stomach a dull, persistent ache that she had long learned to ignore. Hunger was a familiar monster, but the fear was a ravenous beast, growing bolder with each passing day. Her eyes, the color of storm clouds, were fixed on a canvas before her. Echoes of dawn, she called it. A sprawling landscape of a city's skyline at that fragile moment between night and day, when the first whispers of light painted the dark with hope. It was a chaotic symphony of vibrant purples, fiery oranges, and the softest, most ethereal golds, bursting forth from an oppressive, inky blackness. This painting wasn't just art. It was a desperate prayer. It was her last fragile thread of hope, tethering her to a life she refused to surrender. A bitter sigh escaped her lips, ghosting into the cold. Her late father. A good man, in his own way, with a laugh that could fill a room and a heart too big for his own good. But his hands always found their way to the green felt of a poker table or the glowing screens of virtual slot machines. Alara closed her eyes, a searing image flashing through her mind, her father, hunched over a cluttered table, surrounded by empty whiskey glasses and scattered betting slips, his face pale and drawn under the harsh glare of a single bare bulb. He'd promised every single time that this would be the last. This was the big win. This would fix everything. But the wins never came, and the debts only mounted, growing like a venomous vine, strangling their once modest life. The memory was a lead weight in her chest. She remembered the day they came. Not the bank, not the official letters, but men. Men with hard eyes and suits that smelled of expensive cologne and cheap cigarettes. They weren't looking for her father, not anymore. He was gone, taken by a sudden, brutal heart attack a year ago, leaving Alara with nothing but his tattered sketchbooks and a monstrous, suffocating mountain of gambling debt. $37,000. It was a sum so astronomical, so utterly unattainable for street artists who barely scraped by. It felt like a sick joke. "You're not responsible, Alara," her Aunt Beatrice had whispered, her voice thick with pity, her eyes avoiding Alara's. "Let them take what they want. You start fresh." But Alara couldn't start fresh when her father's ghost haunted every corner of their tiny apartment, when the shame of his choices felt branded onto her own skin. And besides, they didn't just want things. They wanted her. A shudder ran through her, unrelated to the cold. Victor Rostova, the Viper, as he was known in certain circles. The name alone sent a tremor of raw fear down her spine. He wasn't a banker. He was a predator, sleek and merciless. He had appeared at her door 3 months after her father's funeral, a chillingly polite smile plastered on his lips, his eyes dark and flat like obsidian, promising swift and brutal consequences. "Miss Vance," he had purred, the sound like silk dragging over sandpaper. Such a beautiful young woman, burdened by a father's follies. A shame. Alara remembered the faint, sickening scent of his expensive cologne, sandalwood and something sharp, metallic, like blood, clinging to the air around him. She had clutched the doorknob, her knuckles white, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Ah, I don't have it," she'd stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm an artist. I sell paintings. I barely make rent." Victor had merely chuckled, a low, ominous sound that vibrated through the thin door. "Details, details. Your father made a deal. And now you inherit the terms." He had stepped closer, his shadow falling over her, suddenly vast and suffocating. "Consider this a friendly reminder, Miss Vance. You have 1 week, or the terms will become much less friendly and much more personal." The last word had been a caress, yet it felt like a whip lashing across her skin. It wasn't just about money. It was about ownership, about turning her into another one of his assets, another soul he could crush. That encounter had stripped away the last vestiges of her youthful idealism. She was no longer just a struggling artist. She was prey. The city, once a canvas of inspiration, now felt like a sprawling, dangerous jungle, every shadow a potential threat. Her small, precious paintings, usually a source of joy, now felt like futile gestures against the crushing weight of her reality. She tried to sell more, worked odd jobs, scrubbing floors in offices and pouring coffee with numb fingers, but it was never enough. The Viper's weekly reminders came, each one a tightening noose. His men, silent and menacing, sometimes loitered outside her building, their presence a suffocating blanket of dread. Now only echoes of dawn remained. Her masterpiece, her last card to play. It was chosen to be showcased at the Velvet Canvas, an underground art auction notoriously exclusive, operating beneath the radar of the art establishment but frequented by the city's wealthiest and often shadiest patrons. It was a desperate gamble, a venture into a world she didn't belong, but it was her only shot at freedom. Alara dipped her finest brush into a puddle of shimmering gold, her hand trembling slightly. This painting represented everything she had. Her talent, her soul, her defiant spark. If it failed, the abyss waited. The cold reality of Viktor Rostova's personal terms loomed, a fate far more terrifying than homelessness. She imagined his cruel smile, his obsidian eyes, the way he would savor her fear. The thought made her stomach churn, a bitter taste rising in her throat. She needed this. She needed to be seen, to be valued, just this one time. This wasn't just about paying a debt. It was about reclaiming her life, her dignity. It was about proving, if only to herself, that she wasn't just her father's mistakes, that she was Alara Vance, an artist who deserved more than fear. The city outside her window, a sprawling tapestry of distant lights, hummed with 1,000 unseen lives, none of them aware of the silent battle raging within her tiny room. She smoothed a final touch of gold onto the canvas, the metallic sheen catching the meager light from her single lamp. Echoes of dawn gleamed, a beacon against the encroaching darkness. Tomorrow she would face them, and pray, with every fiber of her being, that dawn would truly break. The anticipation, sharp and agonizing, made her heart pound a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She was a lamb walking to slaughter, but she would walk with her head held high, clutching her last, desperate hope. The velvet rope, the hushed whispers, the judging eyes of the elite and Victor. He would be there. She felt it, a cold certainty. And then her fate would be sealed. The biting chill of the November air clawed through the cracked window pane of Alara Vance's studio apartment, a constant, unwelcome companion. It seeped into her bones, making her fingers ache as she meticulously mixed shades of midnight blue and bruised violet on her worn palette. The scent of turpentine and old coffee was a familiar comfort in the tiny space, a world away from the glamorous, perfumed existence she sometimes glimpsed through flickering news reports. Her studio, if one could call it that, was a single room above a perpetually bustling bakery in the city's less-than-picturesque industrial district. The faint, sweet smell of yeast and sugar often mingled with the sharp tang of her paints, a strange juxtaposition of life and art. Alara shivered, pulling the threadbare woolen shawl tighter around her shoulders. Her breath plumed in the frigid air, a stark visual of the cold that permeated every aspect of her existence. She hadn't eaten a proper meal in days, the gnawing emptiness in her stomach a dull, persistent ache that she had long learned to ignore. Hunger was a familiar monster, but the fear was a ravenous beast, growing bolder with each passing day. Her eyes, the color of storm clouds on the verge of breaking, were fixed on the canvas before her. Echoes of dawn, she called it. A sprawling landscape of a city skyline at that fragile moment between night and day, when the first whispers of light painted the dark with hope. It was a chaotic symphony of vibrant purples, fiery oranges, and the softest, most ethereal golds, bursting forth from an oppressive, inky blackness. This painting wasn't just art. It was a desperate prayer. It was her last fragile thread of hope, tethering her to a life she refused to surrender. This is it, she thought, the words a silent mantra. My last chance. My only chance. A bitter sigh escaped her lips, ghosting into the cold. Her late father. A good man, in his own way, with a laugh that could fill a room and a heart too big for his own good. But his hands always found their way to the green felt of a poker table or the glowing screens of virtual slot machines. Alara closed her eyes, a searing image flashing through her mind. Her father, hunched over a cluttered table, surrounded by empty whiskey glasses and scattered betting slips, his face pale and drawn under the harsh glare of a single bare bulb. He'd promised every single time that this would be the last. This was the big win. This would fix everything. But the wins never came, and the debts only mounted, growing like a venomous vine, strangling their once modest life. The memory was a lead weight in her chest. She remembered the day they came. Not the bank, not the official letters, but men. Men with hard eyes and suits that smelled of expensive cologne and cheap cigarettes. They weren't looking for her father, not anymore. He was gone, taken by a sudden, brutal heart attack a year ago, leaving Alara with nothing but his tattered sketchbooks and a monstrous, suffocating mountain of gambling debt. $37,000. It was a sum so astronomical, so utterly unattainable for street artists who barely scraped by. It felt like a sick joke. You're not responsible, Alara, her Aunt Beatrice had whispered, her voice thick with pity, her eyes avoiding Alara's. Let them take what they want. You start fresh. But Alara couldn't start fresh when her father's ghost haunted every corner of their tiny apartment, when the shame of his choices felt branded onto her own skin. And besides, they didn't just want things. They wanted her. The realization was a devastating punch to her gut every time it resurfaced. A shudder ran through her, unrelated to the cold. Victor Rostova, the Viper, as he was known in certain circles. The name alone sent a tremor of raw fear down her spine. He wasn't a banker. He was a predator, sleek and merciless. He had appeared at her door 3 months after her father's funeral, a chillingly polite smile plastered on his lips, his eyes dark and flat like obsidian, promising swift and brutal consequences. Miss Vance, he had purred, the sound like silk dragging over sandpaper. Such a beautiful young woman, burdened by a father's follies. A shame. Alara remembered the faint, sickening scent of his expensive cologne, sandalwood and something sharp, metallic, like blood, clinging to the air around him. She had clutched the doorknob, her knuckles white, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Every beat had screamed, "Get away! Run!" But where would she go? I don't have it, she'd stammered, her voice barely a whisper. I'm an artist. I sell paintings. I barely make rent. Victor had merely chuckled, a low, ominous sound that vibrated through the thin door. Details. Your father made a deal. And now you inherit the terms. He had stepped closer, his shadow falling over her, suddenly vast and suffocating. Consider this a friendly reminder, Miss Vance. You have 1 week, or the terms will become much less friendly and much more personal. The last word had been a caress, yet it felt like a whip lashing across her skin. It wasn't just about money. It was about ownership, about turning her into another one of his assets, another soul he could crush. No, she'd vowed then, a fierce, desperate ember sparking in her chest. Not me. Never me. That encounter had stripped away the last vestiges of her youthful idealism. She was no longer just a struggling artist. She was prey. The city, once a canvas of inspiration, now felt like a sprawling, dangerous jungle, every shadow a potential threat. Her small, precious paintings, usually a source of joy, now felt like futile gestures against the crushing weight of her reality. She tried to sell more, worked odd jobs, scrubbing floors in offices and pouring coffee with numb fingers, but it was never enough. The Viper's weekly reminders came, each one a tightening noose. His men, silent and menacing, sometimes loitered outside her building, their presence a suffocating blanket of dread, a constant whisper of what awaited her. Now only echoes of dawn remained. Her masterpiece, her last card to play. It was chosen to be showcased at the Velvet Canvas, an underground art auction notoriously exclusive, operating beneath the radar of the art establishment but frequented by the city's wealthiest and often shadiest patrons. It was a desperate gamble, a venture into a world she didn't belong, but it was her only shot at freedom. Please, she pleaded silently to the universe, just let this be enough. Alara dipped her finest brush into a puddle of shimmering gold, her hand trembling slightly. This painting represented everything she had. Her talent, her soul, her defiant spark. If it failed, the abyss waited. The cold reality of Viktor Rostova's personal terms loomed, a fate far more terrifying than homelessness. She imagined his cruel smile, his obsidian eyes, the way he would savor her fear. The thought made her stomach churn, a bitter taste rising in her throat, thick with despair. She needed this. She needed to be seen, to be valued, just this one time. This wasn't just about paying a debt. It was about reclaiming her life, her dignity. It was about proving, if only to herself, that she wasn't just her father's mistakes, that she was a Lara Vance, an artist who deserved more than fear. The city outside her window, a sprawling tapestry of distant lights, hummed with 1,000 unseen lives, none of them aware of the silent battle raging within her tiny room. She smoothed a final touch of gold onto the canvas, the metallic sheen catching the meager light from her single lamp. Echoes of dawn gleamed, a beacon against the encroaching darkness. Tomorrow she would face them. And pray, with every fiber of her being, that dawn would truly break. The anticipation, sharp and agonizing, made her heart pound a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She was a lamb walking to slaughter, but she would walk with her head held high, clutching her last, desperate hope. The velvet rope, the hushed whispers, the judging eyes of the elite and Victor. He would be there. She felt it, cold certainty, a shadow falling over her already fragile hope. And then her fate would be sealed. The air outside was sharper than Alara remembered, slicing through her thin coat as she stepped out onto the bustling sidewalk. The journey to the velvet canvas was a blur of nervous energy. She clutched the strap of her worn satchel, a silent prayer echoing in her heart. This wasn't just another gallery opening. It was a pilgrimage to a gilded cage, a place where fortunes were made and lives were irrevocably altered. The casino's entrance loomed, a monstrous maw of polished black granite and flashing neon. She pushed through the heavy glass doors, the sudden rush of warm, perfumed air hitting her like a physical blow. The cacophony of slot machines, the murmur of hushed conversations, the clinking of crystal glasses, it was a sensory overload that made her head spin. She felt immediately, acutely out of place, a wildflower lost in a meticulously manicured, predatory garden. Her simple black dress, her best and only one, felt like a costume, cheap and ill-fitting amidst the shimmering silks, tailored suits, and dazzling jewels that adorned the patrons. Following the discreet signs, Alara found her way to the velvet canvas, a secluded wing of the opulent casino. The entrance was guarded by a velvet rope, a literal barrier between her world and theirs. A stern-faced bouncer, his bulk intimidating, checked her name off a list with a curt nod, barely glancing at her. The gallery itself was a symphony of dark luxury. Walls of brushed velvet absorbed sound, making the whispers of the elite even more conspiratorial. Spotlights cast dramatic halos over priceless works of art, their vibrant colors muted by the sophisticated dimness. The scent of aged whiskey, expensive cigars, and 100 different high-end perfumes hung heavy in the air, a cloying richness that made her throat tighten. She spotted Echoes of Dawn almost immediately, perched proudly on an easel in a prime position. Her heart gave a painful lurch. Under the focused light, her painting seemed to glow, a beacon of defiant beauty. It felt utterly vulnerable, exposed to the judgment of eyes that probably saw more zeros in bank accounts than brushstrokes in art. She smoothed down her dress, wishing she could disappear into the rich shadows. The auctioneer, a man with a booming voice and a perfectly sculpted silver toupee, took to the podium. The gentle hum of conversation slowly died down, replaced by a palpable tension that vibrated through the room. Ilara's palms grew sweaty. Her breath hitched in her throat. This was it, the moment of truth. And now, the auctioneer declared, his voice resonating through the silent room, we move to Lot 17. A remarkable piece by the emerging artist, Ilara Vance. Echoes of Dawn, a powerful, evocative work that captures the soul of our city. He gestured grandly towards her painting. We opened the bidding at $50,000. A ripple went through the crowd. Ilara watched transfixed as the bids began to climb, slowly at first, then with more confidence. 70, 80, 100,000. Hope, fragile and terrifying, began to unfurl its wings in her chest. This could be it. Freedom. Real freedom. Just as the bid reached 150,000, a sudden, inexplicable shift occurred in the atmosphere. A hush fell, deeper and more profound than before. The subtle clinking of glasses ceased. Every head in the room, it seemed, turned towards the grand arched entrance to the gallery. Ilara felt an inexplicable prickling sensation on the back of her neck. A wave of unease, cold and sharp, washed over her. And then he entered. Damien Volkov, the shadow boss, the man of hushed whispers and unspoken power. He was an imposing figure, tall and broad-shouldered, cloaked in an impeccably tailored dark suit that seemed to absorb the light around him. His hair, dark as a raven's wing, was swept back from a severe, angular face. His eyes, they were the color of cold steel, devoid of warmth, yet holding a chilling, almost hypnotic intensity. He moved with a silent, effortless grace, his presence radiating an aura of dangerous control that commanded immediate, absolute silence. He didn't stride. He glided, like a predator surveying its domain. Ilara's breath caught. He wasn't just wealthy. He was power personified. An apex predator in human form. A sudden visceral fear spiked through her, raw and unbidden. His gaze swept over the room, acknowledging no one, yet missing nothing. It paused for a fraction of a second on Echoes of Dawn, and then it landed on her. A shiver, not of cold but of primal recognition, shot down her spine. His eyes held hers for a terrifying instant, a silent assessment that felt as though he was seeing straight into her soul, past the worn clothes, past the fear, into the very core of her being. She felt exposed, seen in a way she never wanted to be. Before Ilara could even process the unsettling encounter, another figure burst from the side, shattering the fragile quiet. Victor Rostova, the Viper. His face was contorted with a venomous rage, his eyes fixed on Ilara. His expensive suit, usually pristine, now seemed to ripple with his barely contained fury. Stop this farce. Victor bellowed, his voice coarse and ugly, ripping through the sophisticated air like a rusty blade. He ignored the glares of the shocked patrons, his gaze locking onto Ilara. This woman owes me. Her art, her future, everything is mine as collateral for her father's debts. He took a menacing step towards her, his hand reaching out as if to physically claim her. She is my property. This painting is meaningless. She belongs to me. The words hit Alara like a volley of stones, each one bruising her spirit. The elegant faces in the crowd turned towards her, their expressions a mix of curiosity, disdain, and morbid fascination. A flush of mortifying shame burned across her cheeks, a fire that threatened to consume her. Her carefully constructed facade of composure crumbled. She wanted to scream, to run, to bury herself in the earth and disappear. This is it, she thought, her heart plummeting into the abyss. This is the end. He's going to take me. Victor was almost upon her, his predatory smile widening, when a deep, resonant voice, calm and utterly devoid of emotion, cut through the tension. 1,000,000. The two words, spoken with chilling authority, hung in the air, echoing in the sudden, absolute silence. I snapped to Damien Volkov. He hadn't moved. His gaze was still fixed on Alara, his expression unreadable, yet radiating an undeniable, almost suffocating power. He hadn't even looked at the painting. He had merely assessed. And then he had bid. Alara stared at him, her mind a blank. 1,000,000. For her painting. No, not just for the painting. The unspoken implication hung heavy between them. He hadn't just bought her art. He implicitly bought her out of Victor's clutches. The sheer, overwhelming audacity of it. The terrifying, absolute control. Victor froze, his face a grotesque mask of shock and fury. What did you say? He stammered, his voice losing its venom, replaced by a desperate, bewildered rage. Damien Volkov's gaze finally, slowly, shifted from Alara to Victor. There was no warmth, no flicker of humor, just a chilling, definitive command in those steel-gray eyes. I said 1,000,000. And I believe that settles the matter. He took a single, deliberate step forward, a silent, powerful declaration that needed no further words. The auctioneer, pale and shaken, quickly slammed his gavel. Sold. To Mr. Volkov. Alara felt a dizzying mix of emotions. Shock, terror, the profound humiliation of being publicly claimed like a piece of property. Yet, beneath it all, a strange, undeniable warmth began to spread through her chest. A sense of temporary, bewildering relief. The Viper had been thwarted. For now. But by whom? A man whose gaze promised a different kind of danger, a different kind of ownership. Her heart hammered, not just from fear, but from a burgeoning, terrifying curiosity. What had she just stepped into? And what would this shadow boss demand for the price of her freedom? The aftermath of the auction was a blur of hushed conversations and pointed stares. Alara stood rooted to the spot, echoes of dawn glowing mockingly beneath the lights, its $1,000,000 price tag a phantom weight in her mind. Damien Volkov, the shadow boss, had vanished as silently as he'd appeared, leaving behind a wake of stunned silence and unspoken questions. Alara felt like a ghost, transparent and utterly bewildered, amidst the glittering fragments of what had just transpired. She stumbled out of the velvet canvas, the cool night air doing little to clear the fog in her mind. Her feet, usually so sure on the cracked pavement of her own neighborhood, felt foreign and uncertain on the polished marble. She yearned for the familiar grit of her studio floor, the comforting scent of her paints. But even that solace was about to be snatched away. The next morning, the call came. A curt, clipped voice. Miss Vance, your studio. There's been an incident. Her blood ran cold. Victor. She arrived to find her humble sanctuary ransacked. Canvases, small and unfinished, lay slashed and trampled. Tubes of paint had been squeezed dry, their vibrant colors smeared across the floor like fresh wounds. Her precious collection of brushes, carefully cleaned and arranged, lay scattered, many snapped in half. Even the scent of turpentine, usually a balm, now reeked of destruction. A single jagged message, scrawled in black spray paint across her largest remaining blank canvas, screamed, mine. Tears, hot and furious, streamed down Alara's face. Not for the ruined materials, those could be replaced. But for the violation, The callous disregard. He hadn't just destroyed her art, he had desecrated her last refuge. It was a brutal public declaration that Viktor Rostova would not be easily deterred. Her hands trembled, clutching the edge of a splintered easel. The fragile hope from the night before, the momentary reprieve Damien had offered, now felt utterly ephemeral. She was truly alone. A sleek black sedan, silent as a shark, pulled up to the curb. Marco, Damien's stoic right-hand man, emerged. He didn't offer sympathy, only a detached efficiency. His eyes, dark and unreadable, swept over the wreckage, then settled on Alara, who stood amidst the ruins, her face stained with tears and paint. "Mr. Volkov is expecting you, Miss Vance," he said, his voice flat, allowing no room for argument. "Your belongings have already been retrieved and secured." Alara blinked. "My belongings? How?" Marco merely inclined his head towards the apartment door, which now bore a fresh, reinforced lock. "Courtesy of Mr. Volkov." She stared, a chill creeping up her spine. Damien was thorough. Terribly thorough. He had moved her things without her knowledge, without her permission. A fresh wave of apprehension washed over her, mixing with the lingering humiliation and anger. She was merely a pawn, moved on a chessboard she didn't understand. The ride to Damien's penthouse was short but unsettling. The car was opulent, the leather seat soft against her aching body, the tinted windows shielding them from the outside world. It felt like being encased in a powerful, silent bubble. When they arrived, it wasn't just a single apartment. It was an entire floor of one of the city's most exclusive skyscrapers. The penthouse was breathtaking, vast, impersonal, immaculate. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a dizzying panorama of the cityscape, a glittering expanse of lights that somehow felt distant and cold. The furniture was a study in minimalist luxury, sharp angles, muted tones, fabrics that felt impossibly smooth to the touch. It smelled faintly of expensive leather and something crisp, metallic like ozone. It was beautiful undeniably, but utterly devoid of warmth of life of her. Damien Volkov stood by the window, silhouette against the city lights. He turned as they entered, his gaze, as always, piercing. He wore a dark silk robe, his dark hair slightly disheveled, making him appear less formidable, yet somehow more dangerous in his relaxed state. "Miss Vance," he acknowledged, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the vast space. "I trust Marco found you well." It wasn't a question. Alara's voice felt trapped in her throat. "My studio." "Victor." A brief, almost imperceptible sigh escaped him. "Freedom, as you perceive it, is an illusion. Everyone is bound by something. Money, loyalty, fear. Some simply choose their chains more wisely than others." He paused, stepping further into the studio, the scent of his subtle, masculine cologne, something dark and spicy, like ancient forests and distant fires, filling the space. "You wish to paint. Hey, no one is stopping you. If you need inspiration, look out your window. This city is a canvas of 1,000 stories, not all of them clean. Capture that. The shadows, not just the light." He turned to leave, but Alara found herself speaking again, a sudden impulse she couldn't suppress. Why do you do this?" "For me." He stopped, his back to her, his silhouette framed against the brilliant city lights. "You were vulnerable. An asset, as I said." His voice was flat. "And I do not tolerate others laying claim to what is mine." The words were cold, possessive, yet a strange warmth bloomed in her chest. "Mine?" Not in Victor's cruel, dehumanizing way, but in a fiercely protective, almost primal sense. It was a terrifying thought, but in that moment it felt strangely reassuring. He saw her as something to be protected, not broken. Later that week, Alara found herself working late in her studio, a rare burst of inspiration finally taking hold. She was sketching furiously, capturing the chaotic energy of the city at night, the way the lights bled into the darkness. She needed a specific shade of ochre, a vibrant, earthy tone she hadn't yet unpacked. Heading to the small kitchenette for a glass of water, she passed Damien's study. The door was ajar, a sliver of light escaping. She hesitated, her curiosity a potent force. Usually, the study was a sealed chamber, a place she instinctively avoided. But tonight, a faint, melancholic melody drifted from within, soft and haunting. It was a classical piece, a piano sonata, played with a surprising tenderness. Peeking through the crack, Alara saw him. Damien was seated at a sleek, modern piano, his broad shoulders slightly hunched. His fingers, usually so stiff with controlled power, moved across the keys with an unexpected grace, coaxing the plaintive notes from the instrument. His eyes were closed, his face softer, younger somehow, stripped of its usual impenetrable mask. There was a raw vulnerability in his expression, a deep, abiding loneliness that resonated with a forgotten corner of her own soul. He wasn't the shadow boss in that moment. He was just a man, lost in the beauty of a melancholic melody. A quiet gasp escaped her lips, and Damien's eyes snapped open, his posture straightening instantly, the music abruptly ceasing. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by the familiar, cold steel. He saw her. His gaze was sharp, annoyed, caught off guard. Alara's cheeks burned. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to intrude. He stood, walking towards her with that silent, predatory grace. The piano, moments ago a source of unexpected beauty, now seemed like a forgotten prop. You shouldn't wonder, he said, his voice clipped, devoid of the earlier softness. I heard the music, she explained, desperate need to justify herself. It was beautiful. His eyes, however, were unreadable. Some things are best left unheard, Alara. Some stories are best left unshared. He paused, his gaze softening almost imperceptibly, a fleeting flicker of the man she had just witnessed. Return to your studio. Finish your painting. She nodded, a strange mix of disappointment and heightened curiosity swirling within her. He had shown her a piece of himself, a fragile, unexpected fragment. And then he had swiftly hidden it away. But the image of his fingers on the keys, the melancholic melody, the raw loneliness in his eyes, it was imprinted on her mind. The shadow boss wasn't just power and control. He was something far more complex. And the realization, dangerous as it was, drew her further into his silent, watchful orbit, a reluctant moth to a very dark, very powerful flame. What other secrets did he hold? And why, against all reason, did she find herself wanting to uncover them? The unsettling quiet of the penthouse had become Alara's new normal, a heavy blanket that muffled the outside world. She had, against her initial resistance, found a fragile rhythm within her golden cage. Her art had slowly, reluctantly, begun to flow again. The city outside her window, once a distant, glittering menace, was now her muse, its jagged skyline a constant inspiration for the shadows and light she poured onto her canvases. Yet, even as her hands found their purpose, a deeper unease simmered beneath the surface. Victor Rostova, the Viper, he was a coiled thread, silent but ever present in her periphery. Her phone, a battered older model that somehow still worked, had been a constant source of quiet dread since Damien had rescued her. She kept it on silent, often tucked away in a drawer, but even its digital ghost buzzed with a malevolent energy. One morning, while fetching a fresh palette knife from her studio, she saw the screen lit up. A message from an unknown number. Her stomach twisted into a knot, cold dread seeping through her veins. Still hiding, little bird. The cage won't hold forever. I know where you sing. A shiver, violent and uncontrollable, racked her body. How? How did he know? Damien had assured her of the penthouse's impenetrable security, but Victor's words felt like a venomous whisper right next to her ear. The old, suffocating fear returned with a vengeance, wrapping around her like a constrictor. She almost dropped the phone, its cold, hard casing feeling suddenly heavy, contaminated. Later that week, she dared to venture out to the small, upscale coffee shop she used to frequent, a desperate attempt to reclaim a sliver of her old life. Damien's rules were strict. No leaving without Marco or another one of his guards. Today, Marco, silent and watchful as ever, sat at a discreet distance, pretending to read a financial newspaper. Alara clung to her latte, its warmth a small comfort against the internal chill. The aroma of freshly ground beans, usually so invigorating, now tasted faintly of fear. She felt eyes on her, a sudden cold prickle on her skin. Looking up, her gaze locked with a man across the street. He was unremarkable, dressed in faded jeans and a nondescript jacket, but there was a cruel smirk on his face, a blatant challenge in his eyes. He lifted his phone, snapped a quick photo of her, and then pointedly made a call, his lips moving in an exaggerated, taunting manner. Alara's breath hitched. It was a message, a clear, sickening message from Victor. He knows where you are. He can reach you. The delicate porcelain mug rattled in her trembling hands. She felt exposed, vulnerable, despite Marco's silent presence. He was just across the street, casually holding a phone. What could Marco do against a ghost? She returned to the penthouse, her resolve crumbling. The beautiful studio, the endless supplies, the gourmet food, none of it mattered if she was still a target. She felt Damien's pervasive protection, yes, but it was a passive thing, a shield. Victor was active, insidious, chipping away at her fragile sense of security. She had to do something. An unfortunate but predictable tantrum, Damien interrupted, his tone dismissive. He sought to assert a claim he no longer possesses. A foolish endeavor. He stepped closer, his presence immediately filling the expansive room, making it feel smaller, more suffocating. Let us be clear, Miss Vance. Your father's debt is settled. I hold the markers now, and with it your obligation. Alara's heart hammered. Obligation? I can work. I can paint. I can pay you back. A ghost of a smile, cold and humorless, touched Damien's lips. Such quaint notions. You will not pay me back in coin, Alara. You are under my protection. And in my world, protection comes with terms. He gestured around the penthouse. You will reside here. You will continue your art. You will be safe. But you will not leave without my express permission. You will not communicate with anyone I deem a threat. You will not defy my instructions. He paused, his eyes locking onto hers, the intensity almost painful. You are my asset now, Alara. Not in the manner Victor Rostova desired, but in a way that serves my purposes. And in return, your safety is guaranteed. Absolute. Unquestionable. Alara felt the words sink in, heavy and irreversible. So, I'm just traded, she whispered, the bitterness a raw taste in her mouth. From one cage to another. This is not a cage, Alara, Damien countered, his voice losing its detached calm, a dangerous edge creeping into it. This is a sanctuary. A golden one, perhaps, but a sanctuary nonetheless. You will have all you require to pursue your craft, to live without fear. A private studio, materials, anything you desire. Your art will thrive here, but you will understand that my rules are absolute. Disobedience will not be tolerated. He extended a hand, long fingers tipped with perfectly manicured nails. You will not regret this, but you will adapt. Alara stared at his hand. It wasn't an invitation. It was a command. A chilling promise wrapped in velvet. She felt a surge of rebellious anger, hot and fleeting, quickly snuffed out by the cold reality of her situation. Victor was a viper, but Damien was a lion, and she a small cornered gazelle. She had no choice. She had been bought, claimed. Her life, once her own, now belonged to the shadow boss. Her gaze swept over the opulent space. The silent security cameras, visible only if you knew where to look. The heavy, impenetrable doors. The ever-present, watchful eyes of Marco and others she hadn't even met yet. This wasn't freedom. It was a gilded prison, a golden cage. And she, Alara Vance, the artist who painted dreams, was now its reluctant, terrified inhabitant. What would become of her here? And what, truly, were Damien Volkov's purposes? The questions gnawed at her, a new kind of fear beginning to take root. The days that followed blurred into a strange, disorienting rhythm. Alara found herself living in a world of muted grandeur, a captive in a golden cage. The penthouse, vast and impeccable, felt less like a home and more like a high-tech fortress. Its silence was deafening, a stark contrast to the cacophony of her old neighborhood, the street sounds that had once been the backdrop to her life. Here, the city was a distant, shimmering canvas outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, untouchable and observing. Her new studio was, by any objective measure, a dream. A spacious, sun-drenched room with an entire wall of glass overlooking the sprawling metropolis. It was equipped with an easel so grand it dwarfed her, an array of pristine canvases, and a palette of paints in every shade imaginable. Yet, for days, the canvas remained stubbornly blank. The familiar scent of her old studio, a comforting melange of linseed oil, stale coffee, and something undeniably hers, was gone, replaced by the sterile, expensive smell of polished wood and ionized air. She tried to paint, but her hand felt heavy, her inspiration stifled by the sheer opulence. Her brush, usually an extension of her soul, now felt alien in her grasp. It was hard to capture the raw, desperate beauty of Echoes of Dawn when she was living in a world devoid of struggle, yet brimming with a different kind of suffocation. She felt perpetually watched, a silent paranoia that gnawed at her edges. Every faint hum of the building systems, every subtle shift of air, felt like an unseen eye, a constant reminder of Damien's pervasive control. Her meals arrived with an unsettling regularity. Flawless gourmet dishes, presented on gleaming china by silent, efficient staff she rarely saw. The first time a plate of perfectly seared salmon and steamed asparagus appeared, its aroma rich and inviting, Alara had stared at it with suspicion. She was used to instant noodles and burnt toast, to the desperate rationing of her last few dollars. This felt like a test or a trap. She ate slowly, cautiously, each bite a reminder of the chasm between her past and present. Damien himself was a phantom. He moved through the penthouse like a shadow, often unseen. His presence was a constant, undeniable pressure. She would catch glimpses of him in the vast living area, always by the windows, always with a tablet or a thick document in his hands, his face a mask of intense concentration. He never looked up, never acknowledged her directly. Yet she felt his gaze, a prickling sensation on her skin, as if he knew her every movement, her every thought. One afternoon, a delivery arrived, a massive, custom-built wooden art box, filled with the finest brushes, tubes of paint in every imaginable hue, and reams of premium canvas. The smell of fresh linen and rich pigments, a scent she hadn't experienced in years, was almost intoxicating. Her old brushes, humble and frayed, had been treasures. These were instruments of luxury, almost too beautiful to use. It was another unspoken gesture, another layer in the gilded cage. He hadn't just provided, he had elevated. It was both a kindness and a chilling reminder of his absolute power, his ability to anticipate and fulfill her every need, even before she recognized it herself. "You like them?" Alara jumped, nearly dropping a tube of cadmium yellow. Damien stood in the doorway of her studio, his voice a low, unexpected rumble that broke the oppressive silence. He wore a crisp, dark shirt, sleeves rolled up to reveal muscled forearms, his movements as fluid and silent as always. "They're incredible," she admitted, her voice a little breathless. She clutched a soft sable brush, its bristles silken against her palm. "Thank you." He merely nodded, his eyes scanning the blank canvas on her easel. "You haven't touched it." A defensive flush crept up her neck. "It's different here. It's hard to find the grime." His cold gaze flickered to hers. "You confuse grime with struggle, Alara. Creativity does not require suffering. Only freedom. And am I free?" The question, sharp and unexpected, hung between them. It was a challenge, bolder than she usually dared. Damien's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. You are free to paint. Free from debt. Free from fear. Is that not enough? It's a different kind of cage, she whispered, looking down at the brushes, unable to meet his intense stare. A very beautiful one, but still a cage. Curiosity, a dangerous, persistent itch, pulled her closer. Through the tinted glass, she saw him. Damien was bare-chested, his back to her, drenched in sweat. His formidable muscles rippled under taut skin, a testament to raw power and disciplined strength. The tattoos on his shoulders and arms, intricate and dark, flexed with each brutal punch. He wasn't just working out, he was unleashing something primal, something contained just beneath the surface. Then he turned slightly, retrieving a towel. Alara froze, pressed against the cool wall outside the gym. And she saw it. A jagged, angry scar, thick and pale against the tanned skin of his left ribcage. It wasn't a clean surgical line. It was a brutal, uneven mark, as if something had torn through him. It stretched from just under his armpit, curving downwards, a stark testament to a past violence far beyond her comprehension. It looked old and deep. Damien caught her eye in the reflection of the glass. His body immediately stiffened, the intense focus on his workout replaced by a familiar, almost terrifying alertness. His eyes, usually cold steel, held a fleeting flicker of something Alara couldn't quite decipher. Surprise, annoyance, perhaps even a hint of vulnerability. He grabbed a shirt from a nearby bench, pulling it on with a swift, decisive motion, effectively concealing the stark reminder of his past. Alara, he stated, his voice devoid of emotion, yet carrying a dangerous undertone. You shouldn't be wandering at this hour. He walked out of the gym, the scent of sweat and something uniquely masculine, sharp, intense, filling the hallway. She felt a blush creep up her neck, embarrassed at being caught staring, yet unable to tear her gaze from his face. I couldn't sleep. Nightmare. She swallowed. I saw your scar. His jaw tightened. He didn't deny it. Some wounds are earned, Alara. Not all of them heal cleanly. He started to walk away, dismissing her, dismissing the moment. Who was she? The question burst from Alara, impulsive and reckless. She didn't know why she asked, but the deep, aching loneliness she'd seen in his eyes at the piano, coupled with the brutal mark on his skin, screamed of a profound loss. Damien stopped, his back to her once more, his shoulders tense. The silence stretched, heavy and charged. Alara braced herself for a sharp rebuke, for a firm reminder of the boundaries he had so meticulously erected between them. But when he finally spoke, his voice was different. Lower, rougher. A hint of the fragility she'd glimpsed at the piano. My younger sister, he said, the words heavy, each one a stone dropped into still water. Lena. She was sunshine. Pure, unadulterated light. He exhaled slowly, a sound like a physical ache. I was young, too eager to prove myself in this life. He gestured vaguely, indicating the world he inhabited. I made mistakes, let down my guard, and they found her. They used her to get to me. Alara felt her breath catch in her throat. The sheer, devastating weight of his confession. He wasn't just a protector. He was a man haunted by the ghost of a failure to protect. I wasn't fast enough, he continued, his voice a near whisper, devoid of its usual power. I wasn't strong enough. Not then. I found her after. Too late. The scar, it's a reminder of what happens when I fail, of what happens when someone vulnerable trusts me, and I can't keep them safe. He finally turned, his eyes, usually so guarded, now held a raw, profound grief, a depth of pain that twisted Alara's heart. It's why I don't let people close. It's why I don't look away. Not anymore. Alara felt an overwhelming surge of empathy. Her own history of helplessness, of being unable to protect herself from Victor, resonated deeply with his profound regret. She saw not the ruthless shadow boss, but a man broken by loss, rebuilding himself into an unyielding shield. My father, he wasn't strong either, Alara confessed, her own voice trembling, fragile in the vast silence. He was kind, too kind, and he lost himself to gambling, to the promises of quick money. He left me everything, but mostly he left me dead and fear. I kept trying to save him, even after he was gone. Kept trying to fight Victor on my own. Because I was ashamed. Ashamed that I was weak. That I couldn't fix it. That I became a burden. The last word was a choked whisper, the deepest, most humiliating fear she carried. Damien took a step closer, then another, until he stood directly in front of her. His hand, so often a tool of command or violence, reached out slowly, tentatively. He didn't touch her, but his fingers hovered inches from her cheek, radiating a palpable warmth. You were never a burden, Alara. You were collateral damage. And you were never weak. You were fighting with the wrong weapons. Against a monster who knew only how to exploit kindness. His eyes, dark and intense, searched hers. We are both survivors, Alara. Forged by fire. Scarred by what we couldn't control. And we both carry the weight of those we couldn't save. Or those who couldn't save themselves. The words were a balm, a revelation. She wasn't alone. He understood. This dangerous, powerful man, who commanded an empire of shadows, understood her deepest, most hidden fears. A profound sense of connection, raw and undeniable, sparked between them, hotter than any fire. Damien, she whispered, her voice a fragile plea. She leaned into his touch, a silent invitation, a desperate yearning for comfort, for understanding. His hand finally settled on her cheek, rough yet incredibly gentle, his thumb brushing over the soft skin beneath her eye. His gaze dropped to her lips, lingering for a breathless moment. The air crackled with unspoken desire, with the weight of shared grief and burgeoning hope. His scent, that intoxicating mix of darkness and intensity, enveloped her, drawing her closer. Alara, he murmured, his voice a low thrum against her skin, a dangerous promise. He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She couldn't. Her eyes fluttered closed as his lips, firm and warm, met hers. It wasn't a demanding kiss, not yet. It was soft, hesitant, full of a tentative tenderness that shocked her to her core. A question, a plea, a shared secret blooming in the silence. It tasted of unspoken longing, of the bitter tang of past sorrow, and the sweet, dizzying promise of something new, something dangerously exhilarating. His fingers tightened slightly on her cheek, holding her steady, while her own hands instinctively rose to grip the silken fabric of his shirt, clinging to him as if he were the only solid thing in her fractured world. The kiss deepened, a slow burn igniting a fire she hadn't known lay dormant within her, connecting their scarred souls in a way she never thought possible. In his embrace, amidst the cold luxury of his penthouse, Alara felt something shatter inside her, and something new, terrifyingly beautiful, begin to rebuild. The tenderness of Damien's kiss, a forbidden whisper in the vast silence of his penthouse, had both terrified and thrilled Alara. That night, she spent hours drafting an email, a desperate plea to an old friend who worked in legal aid. She explained vaguely about a former business associate of her father's, about harassment, about needing a restraining order. She knew it was futile, a naive gesture against a man like Victor, but she had to try. The very act of writing, of seeking a solution within the legal boundaries she understood, was an act of defiance, a desperate claw for control. She couldn't just sit there, waiting to be hunted. The reply came 2 days later. A short, apologetic message. Alara, I'm so sorry. I looked into the name you mentioned, Victor Rostova. It seems he has significant connections. We can't pursue this. It would be dangerous for everyone involved. The words were a cold shower, extinguishing her last spark of independent hope. She was truly powerless. The legal system, designed to protect the vulnerable, bent and broke under the weight of men like Victor. Her attempt to fight back had not only failed, but had illuminated the depth of his reach. A profound sense of helplessness washed over her, making her feel small and insignificant. That evening, Damien found her curled on the oversized velvet sofa in the living room, staring blankly at the city lights. She hadn't even heard him approach, so lost was she in the suffocating labyrinth of her fear. The scent of his distinctive cologne, a blend of dark wood and something sharp, citrusy, announced his presence before she even registered his silhouette. "You look troubled," he stated, his voice a low, even tone. He didn't ask, he observed, his steel-gray eyes probing. Alara flinched, pulling her knees tighter to her chest. "He contacted me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Victor. He knows where I go. He threatened me." Again, she extended her phone, displaying the anonymous message, her hand trembling. Damien took the phone, his long fingers carefully avoiding contact with hers. He read the text, his expression unreadable, yet a subtle tightening around his jaw muscles was the only visible tell of his internal reaction. A predictable nuisance. Nothing more. Nuisance. Alara's voice cracked, a surge of frustrated despair pushing past her fear. "He wrecked my studio. He stalks me. He sent me a message saying mine. How is that a nuisance?" He slowly lowered the phone, his gaze piercing. "Because he is a fly, buzzing around a lion." Irritating, but ultimately insignificant. He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Did you attempt to address this yourself?" The question hung heavy, thick with accusation. Alara's cheeks burned again. I tried to contact someone. For legal help. A flicker of something. Disappointment? Controlled anger? Crossed Damien's face before it smoothed back into its usual stoicism. Naive. And dangerous. You do not understand the nature of such men, Alara. They do not operate by legal help or restraining orders. They understand only strength and consequences. He turned away from her, walking towards the massive desk in the corner of the living room, a space usually reserved for his endless documents. He picked up his own phone, sleek and black, almost blending into his hand. "Marco," he said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous rumble that sent a fresh wave of chills down Alara's spine. "The Viper is attempting to communicate with Alara. Publicly. And he attempted to leverage his influence against her legal inquiries. Handle it." Brief pause. "Not violently. Not yet. But sever his access. Financial. Social. Every avenue. Make him a starve." Alara watched, mesmerized, as Damien spoke. There was no theatricality, no grand pronouncements, just cold, absolute command. It wasn't about broken bones. It was about broken lives. Economic ruin. A far more insidious and effective weapon in his world. He hung up, then turned back to her, his eyes unyielding. "You are under my protection, Alara. That is not a suggestion. It is a fact. My rules are not for your inconvenience. They are for your survival. You will not engage with Rostova. You will not seek counsel from outside sources without my knowledge. You will not, under any circumstances, place yourself in a position where he can reach you." His voice was firm, unequivocal, leaving no room for argument. "Do you understand?" Alara swallowed hard, her throat dry. The anger and frustration had dissipated, replaced by a profound, almost dizzying realization. She couldn't do it alone. Her attempts at independence had only made her more vulnerable, shown Victor exactly where to strike. Damien's world, brutal and controlling as it was, offered a kind of certainty she had never known. A terrifying, absolute safety. "Yes," she whispered, the word tasting like defeat, yet also like a strange, bitter salvation. "I understand." Damien nodded, a single, decisive movement. "Good. Then you will let me handle this. Victor Rostova will learn that laying hands on what is mine carries a price he cannot afford. A price that will make him wish he had never heard your name. His eyes, cold and hard as flint, promised vengeance, not for her, but for his violated claim. And Alara, against every fiber of her independent spirit, felt a strange, weak tremor of relief. She had walked into a golden cage, and now she was beginning to understand that its bars, though confining, were also impossibly strong. She was dependent, terrifyingly so. But for the first time in a very long time, she believed she might actually survive. The Viper's sting was sharp, but the Shadow Boss's warning was an execution. The Viper's recent, pathetic attempts to undermine Damien had solidified Alara's reluctant acceptance of her new reality. The economic blows Damien had dealt to Victor were swift and surgical, like a predator disarming its prey without a sound. Alara had seen the grim satisfaction in Marco's eyes when he reported Victor's declining fortunes, a chilling testament to the unseen power that protected her. She still chafed under Damien's strict rules, the constant surveillance, the gilded cage, but the frantic, suffocating fear that had once choked her was slowly receding, replaced by a strange, unsettling peace. Her art, once again, flourished. The penthouse studio, no longer sterile, had been transformed into a vibrant chaos of canvases, half-squeezed paint tubes, and discarded sketches. She painted the city at night, the way the lights became distorted through a tear-stained window. She painted the raw, desperate beauty of street life she once knew, now seen through the lens of newfound safety. Damien, true to his word, provided everything, yet remained a distant, watchful presence. Their interactions were brief, clipped, often about the progress of her art or his directives. But the image of him at the piano, the melancholic notes hanging in the air, haunted her. It was a crack in his impenetrable armor, a glimpse of something profoundly human beneath the shadow boss facade. One late evening, the city outside was a shimmering tapestry under a heavy, bruised sky. Alara couldn't sleep. A particularly vivid nightmare of Victor's sneering face had jolted her awake, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. She padded silently through the silent corridors of the penthouse, seeking a distraction, perhaps a glass of water from the kitchen. As she passed Damien's private gym, a glass-walled enclosure she usually avoided, she heard the rhythmic thud of a heavy bag. Fleeting moment, a crack in the cold, impenetrable facade of the shadow boss, revealing a vulnerability she hadn't dared to imagine. In its wake, a strange, intoxicating cocktail of hope and trepidation had bloomed in her chest. She found herself stealing glances at him, searching for that momentary softness, that flicker of shared pain, that promise of something deeper than mere protection. She was falling irrevocably into his dangerous orbit. But outside the golden cage, Victor Rostova was unraveling. Damien's quiet, devastating economic attacks had cornered the Viper. Business associates abandoned him, bank accounts froze, and his once unassailable network began to fray. Alara heard the whispers from Marco, clipped reports delivered with a grim satisfaction. Victor was desperate, dangerous, like a cornered animal. This knowledge, rather than bringing peace, stoked a new, restless fear within Alara. A desperate man was the most unpredictable. She was preparing for a small, exclusive exhibition. Not a grand auction, but a curated showing at a new avant-garde gallery downtown, focusing on emerging artists. Damien, in his detached way, had arranged it, insisting her work needed public exposure, even if she herself remained largely under wraps. He had even allowed her to select a single piece for the show, a vibrant cityscape she titled Veiled Truths, a poignant blend of the beauty and brutality she now saw in the world. It was a concession, a sliver of artistic freedom she clung to fiercely. The night before the exhibition, Alara felt a nervous flutter in her stomach, a mixture of artistic excitement and deep-seated anxiety. She stood by her studio window, staring out at the rain-slicked city. Damien was in his study, the faint, low murmur of his voice occasionally drifting from behind the heavy oak door. She needed a specific shade of dark umber, a deep, rich brown, she had stored in a small, rarely used cabinet in the pantry. As she walked past Damien's study, the door was not fully closed. A sliver of light, a thin line of gold, spilled onto the plush carpet. And then she heard it. Not the classical music that had once so unexpectedly soothed her, but Damien's voice, sharp and cold, entirely devoid of emotion. The assets are to be liquidated by morning. No exceptions. Any resistance, and their operations cease to exist. There was a brief pause, a murmur of a response she couldn't quite decipher. Then Damien's voice again, even harder. And Rostova. Ensure his connections are fully severed. His entire network. I want him isolated. Utterly alone. He will have nothing left. No one to turn to. Alara froze, her hand halfway to the pantry door. The words hit her like icy needles, piercing through the fragile warmth that had begun to bloom around Damien. Liquidate assets. Operations cease to exist. Sever his connections. Utterly alone. It was ruthless. Brutal. A chilling echo of the violent underworld she had desperately tried to escape. She knew Victor was a monster, but Damien's calm, almost clinical destruction, it horrified her. She had seen a glimpse of his grief, felt the tenderness of his kiss, but this was the shadow boss in his purest, most terrifying form. She wasn't just safe, she was complicit. Tethered to a man who wielded devastation with the casual ease of ordering coffee. A fresh wave of panic, colder and more suffocating than any fear Victor had ever inspired, washed over her. She was not just under his protection, she was part of his violence. She was implicated. Her hands, which had trembled after Victor's threats, now shook uncontrollably at the casual ruthlessness in Damien's voice. This is not safety, a terrified voice screamed in her head. This is another kind of trap. A beautiful, comfortable, terrifying trap where she was trading one monster for another, darker one. She backed away silently, her heart hammering against her ribs, echoing the frantic beat of a trapped bird. Her mind raced, a chaotic kaleidoscope of fear and betrayal. He was protecting her, yes, but at what cost? To whom? And what if, one day, she became another asset to be liquidated, another connection to be severed? The kiss, the shared vulnerability, had it all been a calculated manipulation? A way to keep her docile in her golden cage? Her breath came in shallow, ragged gasps. She couldn't stay. Couldn't breathe in this opulent prison built on quiet destruction. She had to escape. Not from Victor, but from Damien, from the monster he truly was, and from the monster she feared she was becoming by staying. Her old instinct, honed by years of scraping by, kicked in. She grabbed the worn satchel she'd brought from her old studio, stuffing a few wads of cash she'd been hoarding, a small sketchbook, and a charcoal pencil. She bypassed the security cameras, remembering the blind spots she'd subtly observed. The back service elevator, rarely used, was her only chance. It was a desperate, foolish plan, but fear lent her a reckless courage. The chilly air of the city hit her like a slap as she slipped out of the anonymous service exit on the ground floor. The glamour of the city lights was gone, replaced by the grimy reality of damp alleyways and overflowing dumpsters. She pulled her thin jacket tighter, disappearing into the labyrinthine streets, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to get away. Away from Damien, away from the silent ruthlessness, away from the terrifying shadow of his protection. The rain began to fall, a cold, insistent drizzle that plastered her hair to her face and seeped through her thin clothes. Her shoes, impractical for the slick pavement, slipped and slid. She was alone, utterly, terrifyingly alone, and vulnerable. Then a sudden brutal force slammed into her from behind. She cried out, the sound swallowed by the drumming rain and the city noise. Rough hands seized her, clamping over her mouth, dragging her into the suffocating darkness of a narrow alleyway. The stench of stale garbage and mildew filled her nostrils. Panic, raw and animalistic, seized her. A familiar, sickly sweet scent permeated the air. Sandalwood and cheap cigarettes. Victor, thought you could hide, little bird. His voice, thick with triumph and venom, whispered against her ear. Thought your big, bad protector could keep you safe? He can't be everywhere, can he? And you're still just a stupid, foolish girl. Running right back to me. Alara struggled, kicking and thrashing, but the grip of his men was unyielding. A heavy sack was pulled over her head, plunging her into immediate, terrifying darkness. The world tilted, spun, and then she was lifted, thrown unceremoniously into the back of a vehicle. The sound of a car door slamming shut, the roar of an engine, and the sickening lurch of movement. She was gone, vanished, swallowed by the very darkness she had tried to flee. Her frantic screams died in her throat, muffled by the rough fabric, her desperate cries for help echoing only in the terrifying silence of her own mind. The cold, damp concrete of the warehouse floor had been replaced by the silken sheets of Damien's bed. The stench of decay vanished, replaced by the clean, crisp scent of expensive linen and Damien's subtle, masculine cologne that now permeated every corner of the vast penthouse. Yet, for Alara, the transition was a disorienting haze. Her body ached, a tapestry of bruises and rope burns, but it was the trauma embedded in her mind that held her captive. She drifted in and out of a restless sleep, haunted by fragments of the darkness. The rough fabric over her head, the icy breath of Victor's threats, the sickening lurch of the vehicle, the pervasive feeling of being utterly, hopelessly lost. Every time her eyes snapped open, the opulent ceiling of the penthouse felt like a mocking presence, too grand, too silent. Damien was a constant, unwavering shadow. He was there when she woke, a silent sentinel in the plush armchair by the bedside, his eyes, though tired, never leaving her face. He was there when she drifted back to sleep, the low, steady rhythm of his breathing a strange, unexpected lullaby against the frantic beat of her own heart. He didn't speak much, not at first. His care was entirely in his actions. He brought her small, comforting meals she could actually stomach, broth, soft fruit, warm tea infused with ginger. His large, powerful hands, which she had seen deliver such brutal justice, were surprisingly gentle as he helped her sit up, adjusting pillows, pressing a cool cloth to her feverish forehead. You need to eat, he would murmur, his voice a low rumble that resonated deep in her chest. Not a command, but a quiet, irrefutable truth. Alara found herself clinging to his presence, her gaze following him whenever he moved, a desperate need for him to remain within her sight. The fear of being alone, of being lost in the darkness again, was a visceral, suffocating thing. One night, a particularly vivid nightmare of Victor's sneering face jolted her awake, her scream caught in a choked gasp. Damien was by her side instantly, his hand warm and firm on her trembling arm. It's over, Alara, he said, his voice a low, steady balm against her terror. You're safe. I'm here. She buried her face against his chest, inhaling the scent of him, dark wood, leather, and something undefinably dangerous, yet utterly comforting. His arms, strong and possessive, wrapped around her, holding her tight, a physical barrier against the phantom horrors that still stalked her. She didn't flinch. She didn't recoil. She simply melted into his embrace, drawing strength from his unyielding presence. It was in these moments, huddled in his arms, that the true nature of his protection, terrifying as it was, became her undeniable sanctuary. Days bled into a week. The physical bruises faded, replaced by phantom aches. The rope burns on her wrists healed into faint, white lines, constant reminders of her brush with oblivion. But the psychological scars ran deeper. She startled at sudden noises. The gentle chime of the elevator door sent a jolt of panic through her. She couldn't be alone, not for long. The silence of the penthouse, once oppressive, now felt like a vast, gaping maw, ready to swallow her whole. Damien, with a patience that astonished her, remained by her side. He brought a portable easel and paints into her bedroom, encouraging her to draw, even just mindless scribbles to ground herself. He read to her in his deep, resonant voice, not from imposing philosophical texts, but from classic novels, his tone surprisingly expressive. He would sit, watching her, his presence a silent anchor in her stormy internal world. "You think I'm weak," she whispered one afternoon, her voice still hoarse, staring at a half-finished sketch of a bird trapped in a beautiful, ornate cage. Damien, seated across the room, looked up from a thick binder. His eyes, though weary, were sharp. "I think you are a survivor who was pushed beyond her limits. There is no weakness in that, Alara. Only strength and healing." He closed the binder with a soft thud. "And you are doing exactly that." It was during this period of delicate recovery that Alara heard the final, chilling resolution of Victor Rostova's fate. Marco delivered the report not to Alara, but to Damien, unaware that she was awake and listening from the safety of her bed. His voice was grim, devoid of emotion. "The Viper's network is entirely dismantled, boss. Accounts seized, properties foreclosed. His remaining associates have been given clear warnings. No one will touch him. No one will help him. He's adrift." Damien simply nodded, his face a mask of cold satisfaction. "And Rostova himself?" Marco paused. "He's been relocated to a place where his influence is non-existent, where he will be given time to contemplate the price of his actions. He will not die, boss, but he will cease to be Victor Rostova as he knows it. He will never pose a threat to Alara or anyone ever again." Alara's breath hitched. Relocated. The word, soft and innocuous, had a terrifying finality. She knew with chilling certainty that Damien hadn't merely imprisoned Victor. He had stripped him of everything: his power, his identity, his very capacity to inflict harm. It was a punishment far more insidious than a bullet, a living death in the underworld. It was absolute and utterly terrifying. A profound, disturbing calm settled over her. She should have been repulsed, horrified by the sheer ruthlessness. And a part of her was. But another deeper part, the part that had known raw fear and utter helplessness, felt a perverse, unsettling satisfaction. Victor was gone. Permanently. The monster was neutralized. And Damien, the shadow boss, had ensured it. When Damien entered her room later, the silence between them was thick with unspoken understanding. He saw the shift in her eyes, the dawning acceptance. He knew she had heard. "He won't bother you again," Damien stated, his voice quiet, steady. "Ever." Alara met his gaze, no longer flinching. There was no apology in his eyes, no regret for the brutal efficiency of his methods. Only a fierce, unwavering certainty. He had done what was necessary. For her. "Ah, I know," she whispered, her voice stronger than before. A slow, shuddering breath escaped her. "Thank you." It was a stark realization. The world Damien inhabited was harsh, unforgiving, steeped in shadows. But within those shadows, he had created an impenetrable circle of safety around her. He was a monster, perhaps, to those who crossed him. But to her, he was the only one capable of truly protecting her from the real monsters. The gilded cage, once a symbol of her captivity, now felt like the strongest, safest place she had ever known. She had run from his darkness, only to discover that his darkness was her ultimate shield. Her gratitude was profound, tangled with a nascent, terrifying acceptance of the dangerous man who had claimed her as his own. She was his, and for the first time in her life, that thought brought not despair, but a deep, unsettling sense of peace. The haze was lifting, and the world she was accepting was terrifying, but undeniably hers with him. The last tendrils of the kidnapping's trauma slowly receded, replaced by a quiet, profound sense of peace Alara had never imagined possible. It wasn't the peace of ignorance, but the peace of absolute, unyielding protection. She had seen Damien Volkov, the shadow boss, at his most brutal, his most terrifying. She had witnessed the calculated, devastating efficiency with which he had dismantled Victor Rostova, leaving nothing but a shell of the man behind. And yet, instead of fear, a deep, unsettling gratitude had taken root in her soul. She accepted him, accepted his world, accepted that his darkness was her sanctuary. The penthouse, once a gilded cage, had transformed. It was still immaculate, still vast, still a testament to Damien's immense power, but it now held the vibrant, chaotic imprint of Alara. Her studio, expanded to encompass an entire wing of the floor, was a riot of color and creativity. Canvases in various stages of completion crowded the walls, some still wet with the raw emotion she poured into them. The scent of oil paints and turpentine mingled with a faint, expensive aroma that was uniquely Damien's, creating a strange, intoxicating harmony. Her art, once muted by fear and desperation, now exploded with a newfound vibrancy. She painted the city, not as a source of dread, but as a complex, living entity, full of hidden depths and unexpected beauty. She painted shadows that held secrets and bursts of light that defied the darkness. She painted strength. Her canvases hummed with a fierce, unapologetic energy, each brushstroke a testament to her survival, her resilience, and the dangerous love that had awakened her. Damien often found her there, lost in her creative frenzy, paint smudged across her cheek, her storm-cloud eyes alight with passion. He wouldn't interrupt, simply leaning against the doorframe, a silent sentinel, watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. His gaze, once so unnervable and cold, now held a warmth, a possessiveness that both thrilled and calmed her. She was his, and he had sworn to protect what was his with an unwavering, terrifying devotion. One crisp autumn morning, sunlight streamed into the vast living room, painting shimmering patterns on the polished marble floor. Alara sat curled on the plush sofa, a book forgotten in her lap, sipping chamomile tea. Damien was by the panoramic window, his usual position, a tablet in his hand. The rhythmic tap of his fingers against the screen was the only sound in the peaceful room. But today the silence felt different. Charged. He finally turned, his gaze sweeping over her, lingering for a moment on her face, then her hands, then back to her eyes. His expression was softer than she'd ever seen it, yet imbued with an intensity that stole her breath. Alara, he began, his voice the low, resonant rumble that made the fine hairs on her arms stand on end. He walked towards her, his movements slow, deliberate, each step a declaration. He sat beside her on the sofa, not touching, but close enough for her to feel the warmth radiating from him, the subtle scent of his cologne enveloping her. My world is complicated, he continued, his eyes, those steel-gray depths, searching hers. It is unforgiving, dangerous, and it is not a world I would ever wish upon anyone. His thumb brushed lightly over the faint rope burns on her wrist, a tender, possessive gesture that made her chest ache. But you chose to stay. You accepted me. Accepted this. He gestured vaguely to the penthouse, to the life they had forged. Alara met his gaze, unflinching. I chose safety, Damien. And I chose you. You are my safety. A ghost of a smile, rare and breathtaking, touched his lips. And you, Alara, are my greatest weakness, my most dangerous strength. He took her hand, his fingers lacing with hers, the warmth of his skin an undeniable comfort. When I found you in that warehouse, when I saw the fear in your eyes, the marks on your skin, I realized something. I am a man of shadows. I build empires on power and control. But for you, I am willing to be more. I am willing to build a sanctuary. His eyes darkened, his voice dropping to a raw, husky whisper that vibrated through her entire being. I am obsessed with you, Alara. Obsessed with your strength, your art, your unwavering light in my dark world. I want to keep you safe, not just from men like Victor, but from everything. I want you by my side, always, to wake up to you every morning, to watch you paint, to protect you, no matter the cost, to claim every part of you as mine. The words, possessive and absolute, should have terrified her, but instead, they settled deep in her soul, a profound sense of belonging she had craved her entire life. It was not a demand, it was a promise. a vow etched in the very fabric of his dangerous love. And I want that, Damien, Alara whispered, her voice thick with emotion, tears brimming in her eyes. I want your obsession. I want your sanctuary. I want to be yours. His grip on her hand tightened, almost painfully. He reached out, his other hand gently cupping her face, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheekbone. Then know this, he said, his voice imbued with a fierce, unbreakable resolve. You are my world, Alara, and I will burn empires to keep you safe. I will move mountains to see you smile. I will give you anything you desire. He paused, his gaze dropping to her lips, then back to her eyes, dark with unspoken desire and a breathtaking, dangerous love. And as a testament to that, the entire top floor, the one directly below us, it's yours. A gallery, a workshop, your own kingdom where your art will live, unbound and limitless. A place where you are the sole sovereign. Alara gasped, her eyes widening. A private gallery? An entire floor? It was an extravagant, almost unbelievable gesture, a tangible symbol of his commitment, his possessiveness, and his understanding of her deepest dreams. It wasn't just a gift. It was a testament to his absolute devotion, a physical manifestation of his promise to nourish her spirit as fiercely as he protected her body. Damien. She breathed, overwhelmed, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. My word is my bond, Alara, he murmured, his forehead resting gently against hers. This is not a temporary arrangement. This is a commitment. A future. With me. And for you. He pulled back slightly, his eyes searching hers, a vulnerability she now recognized shining within their depths. Do you understand what I'm asking? What I'm promising? Alara nodded, her vision blurred by tears, but her heart clear. She saw him. The dangerous, ruthless shadow boss, transformed by a love he had never sought, but now held with an iron grip. She saw her future, intertwined with his, a tapestry of light and shadow, violence and profound tenderness. I understand, she whispered, and I accept. And with that, he leaned in slowly, carefully, until his lips met hers. This kiss was different. It wasn't tentative like their first. It was a deep, consuming promise, a declaration, a sealing of their fate. It tasted of his power, his possessiveness, and the fierce, protective love that had made her his sanctuary. Her hands rose, wrapping around his neck, pulling him closer, anchoring herself to the unwavering strength that was Damien Volkov. As their lips parted, he rested his forehead against hers, his breath warm against her skin. Safe, he whispered the word a soft benediction. Loved, chosen, forever. Alara smiled, a genuine radiant smile that reached her eyes, reflecting the sunlight that bathed them both. Forever, she echoed, her voice firm, resolute. She was no longer a trapped bird. She was a phoenix, reborn from the ashes of her fear, soaring within the confines of a love that was as terrifying as it was absolute. Her art would tell their story. The story of Alara Vance, the artist, and Damien Volkov, the shadow boss, who found his light in her and made her his world. Have you ever felt defined by a past you didn't choose? Like Alara, burdened by a father's mistakes, fighting for breath under the crushing weight of debt and a predator's sinister threats. Her salvation came from an unexpected place, the dark, unyielding protection of a Mafia boss whose own deep scars taught him the ruthless cost of vulnerability. This story reminds us that true strength isn't about never falling, but about rising again and finding someone who sees your worth, even when you're convinced you have none. It's a powerful testament to discovering your sanctuary not despite the shadows, but often within them, and realizing that your past pain doesn't define your capacity for immense healing love. If Alara's journey resonated with your soul today, if you believe in fierce protection and the undeniable power of finding your true worth, join our growing community. Like this video, subscribe for more stories of transformative love, and comment below with "I'm chosen" to affirm your own strength and value. Together, let's embrace tales where love conquers all, even the darkest of pasts.